Hi there, welcome to week 6. We are heading quickly toward the end of the course, but I wanted to go over this assignment for week 6. This is the week 6 response paper, and it's completely different than the other 2 response papers that we've done in the course. So I wanted to go over the details because this assignment, more than any other assignment in the course, tends to trip students up a little bit. So I feel like the instructions are clear, but I know each term I have some students that kind of fumble a little bit, and I don't want your grade to be affected by not clearly following or understanding what's being expected of you. So to kind of recap where we are in the term, in week 5, you've already picked out the text that you're going to write about for the week 7 research essay and provided a tentative thesis. So this week you'll want to be sure and look at that feedback as it is graded to make sure there anything that you might need to correct before you move on, because this is what we've done is we have broken down the steps to get to the week 7 research essay. Okay, so at the beginning of the course, you guys have learned about the different literary elements. We have talked about the different styles. We've talked about the literary theories. We have looked at what experts have had to say about the stories that we've written. We've looked at a lot of text evidence. So week 7 is really putting all of that stuff together. So that's why in week 5, for that skill building activity, you were asked to identify the text that you wanted to write about, as well as a tentative thesis. So you want to make sure that you look at that specific feedback that you've been given on that assignment. You want to look for, to make sure that you're using the correct literary theory, because there's only a few literary theories that we're using in this course. And I'll give you a hint. One of them is not psychoanalytical theory, because that is strictly a Sigmund Freud thing, and he was not writing about literature. Okay, so we want to keep in mind that some of these theories we're talking about, we want to make sure they're focused on our fictional characters. Okay, so maybe I'll just pull that up too. So back in week 3, we looked at the different literary theories. So these are the ones that you're going to want to use for your research paper. So if you use something that was not included on that in the week 5, then it won't be, then I would have told you that you weren't allowed to. So you'll need to make sure that you change that. Let me pull this over here to the screen. So we have the formalist theory, biographical, psychological, which is not psychoanalytical, because remember, psychoanalytical is Sigmund Freud, and he's talking about real people. But when we're using the lens of a literary theory, we're looking at these. Okay, so formalist, biographical, psychological, feminist and or gender theory, historical or Marxist theory. Okay, and one thing to keep in mind is when we're using these theories, that doesn't mean that that's what we think that the author wrote about. We don't, if we want to read about Sherwood Anderson and say that he used a Marxist approach, that wouldn't be accurate. We are using that lens where our focus is on that. So we would be looking at the social, economic, and class differences. The same thing with feminist or gender theory. A lot of people want to say that maybe Shirley Jackson was a feminist writer, but you have to remember the lens that we're using now would have been completely different than she would have had. That may have been her point, although remember she was writing horror stories, but if we wanted to look at the lens of a feminist, that is our lens, and using other experts and critics' lens, not necessarily author intent. So I want to make that clear. Okay, So we kind of got off topic there. Okay, so I want to go over this annotated bibliography. This is the announcement that's already in the class, and I kind of broke down the steps because each term I think about, what's a way to make sure that you understand all the different steps so you don't miss any points on this assignment. All right, so you've already talked about the text and the theory and have a working thesis from week 5. You're going to look at that and make sure there anything that you want to change. So before you start doing your research, you make those changes so you have a clear path. So you don't want to be doing psychoanalytical research if that's not going to work on the research essay, which it's not. Okay, so you have that. You've done all of these things. You've made your corrections that I've given you. So you want to move forward then and start looking for the research. Remember, this is for the week 7 research essay. Okay, so once you have all of these things down and you've kind of worked on your thesis from week 5, you're going to go to the GMC literary database, our library and our literary database. You may not use Google searches because it's not going to give you the same resources and the same databases. The databases that are in our college library are not available to the public. They are subscription based because they are peer-reviewed journals, many of them, and that's not available to everybody. It's more for the academic circles, for institutions. Of course, I would hope that you would never use Wikipedia for any kind of resource, SparkNotes, Schmoops, book rags, blogs, or any other kind of non-literary database. Okay, so you're going to go to the library, and I want to point out a couple things. I know I've already had a video about this before, but you have tons of resources here, and you also have a librarian that's available to ask questions. But one of the cool things that our library does is they provide these library guides for certain courses, and our course happens to be one of them. So if you come down here to English and Literature, and then you select English 102, it has all kinds of resources for us. So one of the biggest things in thinking about what we need are the databases. So there is, when you click on the research resources, here's all of the literary databases. So let me just pause here for a moment and make sure that you understand when I say literary database. So your sources are going to come from one of these. Okay. Sometimes students come to the library and they don't use the literary databases. They use more of a generalized one. For example, sometimes for especially like the story of an hour. Maybe they want to look up, they had a troubled marriage. So you're going to, so your topic is going to be focused in on troubled marriage. But that kind of gets away from the literary part of that. May have been a theme of that, but more likely you want to find how that's going to fit in a literary aspect. So if you go to the general databases, you're not going to find specific articles written about the stories. So that's going to be your focus. You're going to come to one of these databases and put in your search terms to find what other people have written about these stories. So you're not going to find a general something about unhappy marriage or a psychological insanity if we wanted to write about Telltale Heart. So it is always within the context of the literary part. Okay, so all of these are literary databases. So you would put in your search terms in here. Okay, so they've made it kind of easy, and there's some other things that help you how to narrow down your keywords. There's also some writing guides that are in here, making sure, you have MLA, how to set up your MLA paper. There's even an annotated bibliography information that takes you right to the Purdue OWL. So you have this little box right here that you can ask a librarian, you can text them, and you can call them, and they love to help. So I highly recommend checking out if you feel like you're struggling. But remember, these are stories that are pretty popular, so there's lots of things that are written about it. So you might have to play around with your search terms when you're looking for these. But as long as you're staying within the literary databases, you're going to find things, because I've been teaching these stories for a while now, and there's plenty of things to use. So as we're talking about that as well, I want to kind of remind you, one of the reasons that you want to use this research in this way and not an internet source search or a Google Scholar search is because I know many students come into a literature class, an English class, and think, well, I'm not an English major, so I'm never going to use any of this again. And one of the things that I want to point out is the process that we've used is a process that you can use for any subject. You need to learn the terms that are important for that subject. For this course, it was the literary elements, but for biology, it's going to be the terms that are important to biology. And then you're going to start learning, where do you find expert information? Where do you find peer-reviewed information? Since we're in the world of academics, where do you find that? It's going to be in the library. Okay, and then finding out, and then being able to find the text evidence, just like we did in the stories, you're going to have to do that in the biology text that you find, or paralegal text that you find, or nursing text. So the process is still very similar of finding where the expert information of what's already being written about the topic. So that's important. So Google Scholar is going to block many things that may say that there's an article, but then by the time you get there, then it has it blocked. And if you just start here, it's not going to be blocked here. And the other thing to think about too, if you're doing Google searches, and you might find an article or a so-called article that's written about Telltale Heart. But if it's not from a known database or a known journal, a literary journal, then the credibility is questionable. So also keep in mind, I've been teaching this course for a while. I'm very familiar with the database and what's written about these authors. So if it's an unusual thing that's found on an internet search, that's going to kind of be a red flag for me, that I'm going to look and see to make sure that it came from this library. And one of the reasons we do that, instead of doing a whole big wide search, I kind of already mentioned it, is we want to have credible sources. These are sources that we know are credible, they're reliable, and we can use them in the academic sense. The internet is full of all kinds of information, but it isn't always credible. It isn't peer-reviewed, meaning that there aren't other experts in the field reviewing it. And it may be unreliable information. Okay, so has to come from the GMC library. And you need to put the URL or the DOI that you get with that source. All right, so the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to evaluate these sources. We've been talking about these stories for a while now. We've been talking about the different literary theories. You already have your research question and thesis. So you're going to evaluate this source. This is the annotated part. The bibliography part are just simply the sources. Okay. The annotated part is you answering the different things about the article itself. Okay. Here is an example of what it should look like. This is MLA formatting. It should be very similar to the formatting we've been using. For this assignment, you need to have 3. You will not be using the primary sources. So if you are wanting to write about Telltale Heart, that source will not be on this annotated bibliography. That's a primary source. All of the things that we are using for this assignment, and keep in mind the next step after this is when you write your week 7 research essay, the sources that you found here, as long as you want them, are going to be part of your works cited page. Again, the difference between an annotated bibliography, remember the annotated are you evaluating it? That's your little annotation underneath the entry, and bibliography simply means resources. And a research paper, it's going to be works cited. These are the works that have been cited within your essay. Okay? So, talked about that. What do annotation and the annotated bibliography mean? Can you copy your entire annotated bibliography for your works cited page? No, because those annotations are for you in your research process. Do I have to use all the sources on my bibliography? Part of the reason that we're doing this is for you to start evaluating the sources. So you'll probably find many more than 3 sources. But let's just say you found 3 and then you have annotated them and you researched them, but then one of them really doesn't support your thesis. So if it's on this and you decide once you're in week 7 working on your essay, you don't have to use that. But again, I think I've kind of driven this home. Is that the resources that you use for this paper need to be scholarly, and they're going to come from the GMC library. That eliminates using Google search, and maybe this is good and maybe it's not. So we're just not going to do that. So here I've taken you through all of that. I did a little video that you can watch. The last thing that I want to discuss is about using AI. AI is a great invention in many things. My husband we planned a trip to Ireland. The very first thing he did was you can ask ChatGPT to come up with a 10-day trip. It'll give you train schedules, it'll give you a hotel, it'll do all of these things. But we never would have put that in ChatGPT and copied and pasted it and then just followed that. It gave us a couple of things that were helpful, but the most of it is it would not have been helpful for our actual trip. The same thing with using this for your essays. I have had many students copy and paste the prompt, put it in the ChatGPT. It produces a pretty good looking essay, but it is not authentic. It is not a student voice. It is not your work. This course is to teach you as a first year or an early college student how to write. If you are only copying and pasting in ChatGPT, you are not learning how to write. Beyond that, it is painfully obvious when ChatGPT is used to write an entire essay. ChatGPT or any of the Gemini or Bard or there's all different kinds of AI out there. It doesn't have a natural voice. It uses unusual patterns that aren't typical of early college student writing. It uses words that aren't typical. There's many things in there that are very obvious. And another thing that AI will do is it will never say, I can't write this for you. It will just put in the information. It'll never say no, or it will always fill it in, whether it's correct or not. It will annotate, but it will, provide citations, but many times they are incorrect. And if you ask it to find sources for you, many times those are incorrect or made up. So do yourself a favor, save yourself a lot of stress. Do not use it to write your papers entirely. because it will be caught. And I hate to, at this end of the course, give zeros for a big of assignment as the research essay or even the final exam. So that's my soapbox. Quit using AI to generate entire papers. You will be caught. And it's academic dishonesty, and you don't want to do that. You're hurting yourself. You are here in college to learn to write, and that's what we're here to do. So, all right, if you have any questions, please reach out. Good luck.